Okay, so this is the one a lot of people have been waiting for. This one and this one also. And I recently received this one, and this is the closest one to the final version that I have received at this point. There will still be some things that are changing before the final release of it, but this is pretty close to final. So this is the Diatone Cube, and I actually named it the Cube because they didn't want to name it the Toothpick. And I have consulted for Diatone on this build. It's not my design. A lot of it is things that have been designed for my Toothpick product, but it's not my design. It's primarily their design, and I really just helped them to get it to perform a whole lot better than it was performing before, and make it a whole lot more convenient to own and use and actually maintain. So I'll go over my experience working with these Chinese companies a little bit later at the end of the video, but let's first go over the specifics of this quad and tell you a little bit about it. So I've also chosen to primarily focus on the 3-inch version of this quad because, in my opinion, I do think the 3-inch version is a lot better than the 2.5-inch versions, but better is not the correct word to use. It's different. It's a lot faster, and for the environments that I'm flying in, I actually prefer the slightly increased speed. It's not slightly, a lot more increased speed over the 2.5-inch version here. I will talk about 2.5-inch version, but this one is not anywhere near complete, so I'm not going to actually specifically focus on this one. So one of the main things that I had to help them with a lot was getting the weight of this thing down, the weight of the frame, the weight of the canopy, the weight of everything just way down, because when I first got it, the all-up weight of the 2.5-inch version, the 65mm prop version, was somewhere in the vicinity of like 90 grams with a 2S battery, 2S 450mm battery, which is just way too much. It needs to be around 73 to 75 grams for optimal performance in my testing. A lot of people might like it heavier or lighter, I don't know. In my testing, that's what I recommend. So that's the weight target for the 2.5-inch. For the 3-inch, the weight target is 105 grams and under. And this thing comes, right now, as you see here, it comes in at 104 grams with a 450 milliamp 3S battery, and I particularly like this Infinity battery because it's the most cost-effective one. I'm going to say that the 450 milliamp 3S is going to be the 3-inch battery. It's perfect for 3-inch class. It gives you fantastic flight time, really great performance, and it holds up really well. And it's like the smallest real battery, because like I don't consider the 2S batteries quite so real. And definitely the 300 milliamp 3S batteries, I mean, those things are so fickle, they break super easily. So, I mean, I keep getting dead cells on my 300 milliamp 3S battery, so I hate those things. I really prefer the nice 450 milliamp cell. And this battery, in my opinion, is perfect for a 3-inch class. But I'll have a lot more on that a little bit later in future videos. Okay, so this thing is using, first of all, let's focus on the frame. So the frame is obviously very unique. This is a design from Diatone. They came up with this design entirely. I did recommend a couple of things, a couple of variations on it. I tested different thicknesses and whatever for it. The frame is cut from quasi-isotropic carbon, so the fibers are not just running in 2 directions, they're running in actually 4 different directions. And so it has even rigidity throughout the whole frame. And while it looks really skinny and really frail, it's actually surprisingly rigid for how skinny it is, and it holds up to a good amount of beating. At least the 2.5-inch version does hold up to a beating. The 3-inch version is really fast, and I'll talk about that at the end where I make my recommendations of who I think should buy this. The stack that they're using is their Mamba 16x16 stack, and originally this stack had a pin connector on the inside, and that was just unfortunate because the stack has to be soft mounted, and they mount it with all these little rubber bobbin things, and the whole thing can twist and move. So when you crash and hit stuff, the whole thing twists and moves, and these fragile little pins break on the inside. I don't know why not a single company has taken my advice and created those little rubber M2 rubber standoffs with a screw on top that has like a 15mm long thread, so that you can hard mount the whole stack together and then soft mount the entire cube stack onto those rubber standoffs, because then you won't have to worry about the pins at all. Nothing is moving. All the boards are going to move together. Nothing is moving independent of each other. No company has taken that upon themselves to make that happen. I don't know why. There's a number of other ways they can solve this 16x16 stack issue that I have told them. I don't know why. I'll talk about that again at the end with my experience of working with these Chinese companies and trying to get things done at all. The camera in here is using the Runcam Nano 2, not the $35 version. I greatly prefer the Nano 2. I think it has a much more natural image and a much nicer image. It also makes the quad cheaper, and I don't really see a lot of benefit to the super crazy HDR and super crazy sharpness of the other version. Now, this camera is not, in my opinion, the best camera for whoop cams, but it is probably the most popular Nano camera right now, and I actually like it better than the Nano Predator, like significantly better than the Nano Predator, but that video will again come in a bit. It's using 1105 motors at 5500 kV. The kV is a little bit high in my opinion because this thing is super crazy, ultra powerful, just insanely powerful. Again, I'll talk about the performance a little bit later. Other things about it is that it's shipping with the HQ 3x2 prop, and while we were going through the development of this, a lot of things came out that made it really good. So the Mamba stack, the 16x16 stack, they had just finished making it, and this stack, the way they are actually not doing the pins is that I don't know who they are getting to solder all these wires, but if I took this stack apart, you would see there are just a bunch of little wires. Here you can see them in there. Those are a bunch of, it's like 6 or 7 wires in there that connect the two boards together. And that's just wild because those solder joints are really, really small. So that's one of the major negatives that I have about this thing is that you can't really, I mean, you could if you're really crazy, but you can't really swap out the ESC board in this thing because you'd have to, first of all, buy the ESC board, crack off the connector without ripping the pads off, and then proceed to solder all these teeny tiny little wires onto all those pads. And even if you could figure out what all those pads do to begin with, because there's no pinout map on this board. So that's probably the number one downside to this thing, is that if the stack does burn, if the ESC burns out, the stack is pretty much done, or at least you have to buy the ESC board and the flight controller together to repair the whole thing, to get the whole thing. Other things are this canopy on top. Oof, jeez, birds are angry. I yelled at them a lot to reduce the weight of this canopy. It is kind of a copy canopy from a canopy that was created for the toothpick, and they altered it quite a bit and thinned it out quite a bit. It is a nice little canopy. It's got a lot of little areas to mount your antennas. This receiver I'm using is the Emax, like Super Nano FR Sky antenna receiver. It actually performs surprisingly well. I don't know why this receiver performs so well, but their SPI receivers and their like Tiny Hawks perform not nearly as well as this thing. This is a great receiver in this thing. It's got a 200 milliwatt VTX on top, and it's got this really awful battery strap underneath, which probably weighs way too much, and I highly recommend that they use rubber bands or do something to make rubber bands work, but I don't know, they like doing this high class thing and use these actual battery straps. Who knows? Another thing, well, one thing that they didn't actually follow my advice on is that I prefer the battery to be mounted sideways, not actually front to back. And the reason for that is because I just feel like the quad performs better when the battery's mounted sideways. I have some ideas as to why. I can't really verify it. I think it's because we don't really change pitch as much as we do roll, and so when the quad is being held in the pitch, when it's locked, when it's holding its own attitude in the pitch axis, it doesn't have to expend as much energy to hold it in that position, so that you have more energy available for the roll. But then you have more weight on the roll, which takes more energy to manage. So I don't really know why the battery works. It just seems to feel better with the battery sideways, but it does. It's not a big difference, very, very minor, but I can definitely feel that the battery is sideways, especially on the 65mm prop version. Again, I'm not going over the 65mm prop version because it's just not finished yet. The one that I recommend, okay, so here's my final recommendations about this quad. So it's incredibly powerful. But who is it for? This quad is for the person that is skilled at flying. This is not a quad for somebody that's new to the FPV scene. Definitely not for them. They need to go with the 2.5-inch version of the Cube, or a 2.5-inch toothpick, or the Emax Tiny Hawk Freestyle, or something else of that category, or a Tiny Whoop or something. This is definitely not for the new pilot. This is a wicked fast quad, and I highly recommend that they reduce the kV on the motors, but they didn't, so it's just blisteringly fast. The flight that you see me flying, I've actually turned the maximum throttle down to 85, and the problem with the super high kV is that it's still really touchy on the throttle, and it really makes it hard to make it predictable when you're coming out of dives and trying to squeeze through a tight gap underneath a tree when you're kind of like flowing over it. So it is annoying in that respect, but it is super fast, and I know people are going to love the crazy speed. The flight time on this 450 milliamp battery is an obscene 4 to 5 minutes at racing pace, which is crazy to me because it's unusually efficient. And a lot of that has to do with the motors. They are 1105 motors, and they do suck more power than 1103 motors. However, they also give you a little bit better management of the prop because you do have more stator volume, you have more motor, more everything, more magnets, more everything to manage the prop. Now, this is the best motor that was available at the time. There are a series of new motors coming out in the 12 to 13 to 14 millimeter diameter. And so those, I have been testing a lot of them, those do have a little bit better management of the prop, but these 1105 motors, the Mamba motors are unusually good. They're just unusually good motors. Like these, not good in terms of like holding up the durability or whatever, I mean, because they do have the C-clip on top, and now we all know that the C-clip kind of constricts the shaft and does tend to break if you use press fit props, but they're really good performance. And if you watch Nick Burns, he also mentioned when he was testing the 65 millimeter version of this quad that it was unusually powerful for something of this size and something of this stature, and that has a lot to do with the motor. Regardless of the KV, they're just unusually good performing motors, and this is not any different. It is an unusually good performing motor. I do highly recommend the HQ 3x2 prop. There is going to be a gem fan prop alternative coming very soon. Also, this 450 mAh battery is fantastic. Link is in the description below. I highly recommend it. Buy them. I'm sure they're going to sell out very quick, and people are going to have trouble getting them. But generally, my recommendation for this is it's not for the novice. It is for the person that knows how to fly and does not crash a whole lot. If you're doing like crazy bando stuff and you just are skilled and you're just doing really hardcore stuff with your quad, okay, fine, I don't mean that you're bad at flying or something, but this quad is not intended to be crashed. It's not weak. It will hold up to bumps and scratches and hits, but it will not hold up to a crash at speed, and the motors will just bend almost instantly if you hit anything hard at speed because it is really blisteringly fast. I do recommend a throttle limit of about 85, at least 85% throttle limit, and that's going to tone it down significantly. The control of this thing is good, but it's not as good as it could be. And also, this is not my design. This is a Diatone design. I just consulted for them a whole lot, and you are very welcome for being able to access your USB port because they ship this thing without the standoff there. It comes with the standoff, you can screw it on, but it doesn't have it there when you first get it so that you can set it up. Also, you get metal screws in your standoffs so that they don't just rip out and break. Also, the stack is mounted in a way that won't just rip out and break, which is fantastic. All this convenient stuff that I help them with. Okay, so now let's discuss my experience of working with these Chinese companies. So the reason why I started working with so many of these companies to begin with, which now I have contracts with like 10 of these companies, is for two reasons. Number one, because Happy Model was so rude and mean to me when they straight up stole my concept for the toothpick and then blasted it out and put out garbage, like a garbage product that was just breaking all over the place, and just gave the toothpick, while they may have made it more popular, the toothpick name, because people realized that it was something that was inspired by what I was showing off, it's a garbage product, and they really just took advantage of the market with that product. So that was what kind of pushed me into talking to the companies that would normally want to use my concepts for their own products. And so I thought maybe I can work with these companies, use their resources. What I've always wanted to do is have access to the resources that these companies have, that all the resources that they have, so they can develop and produce and create whatever I want. And so everybody wins. The companies get a good product, the users get a better product that actually works properly, and it's not like a pain to use, and I might get a couple bucks on the back end, which is really just a couple bucks, really not worth the time investment. So what actually happened? I do have like 7 different products in the process of being developed, and Diatone has 3 of them right now, and there are going to be 3 really interesting products coming out somewhat soon, which this is one of them, but this is really like a really soft collaboration. It's not like a real hardcore collaboration. The future ones are going to be much more my design, and I just tell them what to do, and I hope they just follow it. But that's really the main issue, is that These Chinese companies, while they do some things great, they almost invariably have incredibly high pride for their product and for everything that they do, which isn't a bad thing. Kudos to them, great to be prideful in what you do. However, a lot of the time, they don't know what they are doing at all. And I would say a majority of the time, they ship products without ever flying them once or handing them to a tester once. Or if they do hand them to a tester, the tester's an idiot and doesn't know what the hell they're looking at. So sorry for that if I offended anybody, but you're not doing your job well if you're testing these things and they're just that bad when they ship. It's really hard for me to believe that they can't find a little 16-year-old in China to come help them with making things more usable. But hey, that's just the way the cookie crumbles in China. For some reason, these companies just don't care. And the majority of the people actually making these things don't even know they don't even know that it flies. It has been such a struggle and so much work and effort to get anything done with these companies that I have abandoned it. I have totally abandoned it. I am going to finish the handful of products that I'm working on, and I'm going to still work with these companies to produce various components. But at this point in time, I am genuinely impressed when any of these companies put out a product that is usable and good and durable and holds up. So through this process, unfortunately, I have lost more confidence in these Chinese companies than I ever had. And I really never had a whole lot of confidence. And really, this really does solidify the kind of Western development of products to focus on, or people like TPS, or just quality name brands. Now, Diatone in particular is not a bad company, and a lot of these companies are really good companies. They genuinely want to make good products. They're not just out to make a buck. Happy Model is one of those companies that just doesn't care and just wants to make a buck. But most of these companies really do want to do good things, and those are the ones that I'm really working with. The trouble is that when I do give them recommendations or I do try to help them with stuff, they always ask why. Why? But why? But why? This is great. Why? This is amazing. What are you talking about? Why? So it's like dealing with a 5-year-old that just keeps asking why. And it's like, stop asking why and just do, because clearly you don't know. So I'm here to help you. And that's where everything breaks down. And I know that's a little bit hard-headed and big-headed of me to say, but if you guys talk to some of these companies and you saw the things that they would say, I mean, like, it's even companies that make cameras. They send me a camera and they say, this is a 1/2-inch sensor, it's like this and like that. And then I get the camera and I open it up and it's a freaking 1/3-inch sensor and it's a tiny little camera. I'm like, what are you doing? Why are you lying to me? Do you not realize that I have eyes, I can see? Or they'll send me a product halfway around the world just for me to tell them it's crap, it doesn't work, and it burnt out on the first plug-in. Couldn't you guys just plug it in yourself and see that it doesn't work? Or they'll send me a lens and it'll just be so awful. And I'll be like, why didn't you just look through the view of the camera and realize that the focal length is like 10 millimeters and you can only see like a field of view of 10 degrees? Like, this is legitimately what happens with these companies that I haven't been sharing, because it's awful for these companies to have this kind of information out there. And I mean, I understand that people out there, these are people's lives that I would be messing with if I shared this stuff. But I am concerned on a different level for these companies. And I am, again, genuinely impressed when they do get any products out the door that actually work. Now, while I'm on this kind of negative rant, let's focus on a slightly more negative dental topic that 3 people actually asked in the 2 videos ago, or a video ago. Let's talk about dental insurance. And this is going to be at least like a 5-6 minute talk, so you can just stop watching now if you want. Dental insurance is really, really frustrating because it's not insurance. They are just using the name or the word insurance improperly. Insurance implies that if something happens, there's somebody that's going to cover you. Dental insurance is not insurance. It's a coupon. It should be called dental coupon, because the vast majority of dental insurances all work the same way, or at least the pretty much standard ones, which is moving to a different model. But currently still, the vast majority of them work in this way, in the following way. There will be a subset of procedures that your insurance company covers. they will cover it at a rate of somewhere between 30 and 75%. I have seen 100% on some very, very few insurances. However, they will only cover it up to $1,000, $1,500. $3,000 is the maximum I have ever seen. It's not like health insurance where you have $1 million per incident and $3 million of total insurance a year, but you pay $250 a month minimum. If you're like the healthiest 18-year-old in the country, you're going to pay $250, $300 a month for your health insurance, and it goes sky high from there. Dental insurance is a total scam because you're paying about $1 or $2 a month for it through your work, most likely. Like people that work regular jobs at companies, they typically give them health and dental insurance as a bonus to their work. Now these companies, they negotiate for the absolute